Welcome to Cloud on Air, live webinars from Google Cloud. We're hosting webinars every Tuesday. My name is Joseph Valente.
I'm Mary Coates.
And today we'll be talking about audit logging. You can ask questions anytime on the platform. There should be a link underneath your screen. And we have Googlers on standby to answer all of your questions. So let's get started. So what are we going to cover today? First of all, we're going to cover the basics. We're going to look at what audit logs are and how you can get them turned on. Then we're going to go into some more detailed ways to use audit logs, so setting up alerting, exports, and storage. Then we're going to look at some advanced use cases like insider risk and compliance. And finally, we'll head to your questions. So let's go to the basics.
All right, so to start out, I'm going to start out talking about Stackdriver. And you might be asking, well, what are we talking about Stackdriver for? I thought we were here to talk about audit logs. But all audit logs come through the Stackdriver platform, and specifically the Stackdriver logging platform. So to give you a little bit of an overview of what Stackdriver is, it is a SaaS ops suite from Google that's used by developers, operators to monitor and troubleshoot your applications, whether they're running on GCP, AWS, cloud native infrastructure, wherever it's hosted. And our goal is to help you keep all of your stuff fast, available, and secure. So there are a number of different tools in the Stackdriver toolkit, 6 of them actually. Today we're going to be focusing on monitoring and logging, and those are the 2 parts of the platform that will allow us to visualize our audit logs, export them different places, alert on them, create charts from them, all sorts of snazzy stuff. And the other tools in the toolkit here, error reporting, trace, debug, and profiler, we're going to save for a later date.
Awesome. So let's have a think about audit logging. What is audit logging? It's an immutable audit trail of all the actions taken by anyone who interacts with your data and systems on GCP. So you can think of it as a record of who did what, where, when, and why on your systems. Audit logs are immutable, and you'll get them for free for 365 days for your admin audit logs, or for longer if you want to pay to have your ingestion of your data access audit logs. So let's look in a bit more detail at how those work. Admin activity audit logs are the most basic audit logs that come turned on for all rights by default on the vast majority of all your GCP services. Like I said, we host them for free for 400 days now, and you can see them in your Stackdriver logging console. Data access audit logs need to be turned on. You pay for ingestion for each of these data access audit logs, but you don't pay for storage. We'll cover how you get these turned on later. But what these show is an additional bit of information around who read or wrote data from your data sources on GCP. Finally, we now have access transparency logs as well, which cover actions by Google support and engineering. So imagine a person created a bucket on your GCP service. That created an admin activity audit log. Then someone uploaded some data into that bucket, read it, looked at the data in the bucket a few times, and created a few more data access audit logs. Let's say they were having a problem with that data, and they needed to go and get some help from support. They call up Google support, and Google support goes and looks at some of the settings on that bucket to see if the appropriate permissions were in place. I just want to reiterate, Google support can't look at the data that's inside your bucket. But we want to log all of this information so that you can get a full picture of your security posture on GCP. When the Google support technician looks at the metadata and ACLs on the bucket, an access transparency log is created that you can also see in your Stackdriver logging console. So let's talk about some of the key features of these. So like I said, these are available for nearly every GCP service in the case of your admin activity and data access audit logs. Our access transparency logs are only available on 6 services. We just launched them into beta 2 weeks ago, but we're planning to add a lot more new services throughout the rest of this year. They have audit grade protections. So these logs are immutable. Once you turn them on, you can't actually delete them. And the reason for this is that we want to make sure that if a malicious insider inside your company is attempting to cover their tracks, these audit logs can't be deleted by them, so you always have a record of what's happened. Retention is 13 months, 400 days for admin activity and access transparency logs. And for data access audit logs, the billing is based on ingestion and not retention. So once you turn them on, we'll charge you to ingest them, and you can decide how to, whether to export them or put them somewhere else. And we'll talk about how you can do that later in this presentation. Cool. So let's look at a demo of how we can turn audit logs on. We'll switch to a demo. So what I've got open here is just a console. I've got the G-Cloud SDK installed. I'm going to call get IAM policy on the project that I want to turn data access audit logs on. You'll see that there's really no information there. There's just your basic sort of IAM config. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to edit that to change the IAM config to tell GCP to turn audit logs on for this particular project. So I'm going to jump into our documentation, which you can see on our website. You can look up configuring data access audit logs on our GCP doc site. You can turn them on for different services. There's different kinds of audit logs, obviously, that you can turn on, and you can also exempt people. I'm going to show you a sample. There's a little YAML sample here that we can pull and paste into our config file to show you how this works. So as you can see in this little config, I'm turning on audit logs for all services in all types, so admin read, data write, and data read. But you'll notice there's also another audit log configs object at the bottom that creates an exemption for a particular service account. I'm going to go ahead and remove that because I don't actually want to exempt anyone from being able to write audit logs. But you might like to do that if there's a service account that's spewing a lot of audit logs that are not valuable to you. So I've saved this new config file. I'm going to go ahead and call set IAM policy on the same project, and success. I've set the new IAM config, and it shows that I've enabled audit logs for all services and all types: admin read, data write, and data read. Let's see how this works. So I'm now going to go ahead and check to see if the data access audit logs are turned on for this particular project. I'm going to go into the storage bucket that I have set up. I've accessed this text file. It said this is text. And now I'm going to head to my logs and see if it shows up in my logs. Click onto Stackdriver logging, and there we go. I've got a get and some list operations. So we'll pause it there before I leak all of my personal information. Okay. So that is how you get data access audit logs turned on and admin read audit logs turned on. Like I said, admin access write audit logs are turned on by default. If you'd like to turn on access transparency logs, you can head to the Google Cloud website. Just look for the access transparency product, and there's a request access button.
All right, so next up we have using our audit logs. We're going to jump into a demo here. All right, and so I'm going to go over into my Cloud Console, and I've got my logs viewer up. I'm going to select my GCE VMs. I'm going to take a look at all my GCE VMs. So right now I'm seeing all the logs that are coming from these GCE VMs. If I just want my audit logs, I'm going to select activity here. And I don't have anything super recent. That's okay. Go ahead and load some older logs here. And let's say that I get a call from, there we go. Let's say I get a call from one of my developers who says, hey, what's going on? My VM is gone. I thought it should be there. And I say, all right, well, what's your VM's name? And they tell me it is my VM2. So I'm going to search for my VM2 in my logs. Let's take a look to see what's going on here. And I'm going to look through all of the audit logs and see if I can find out who took an action, or if the system took an action to get rid of this VM here. All right, live demo, that's always cool. Whoops.
That's how you know it's live, right?
That's how you know it's live. All right, so I can see a number of different things going on here. But the thing that's particularly interesting to me is I can see in these audit logs, I can see it was created on April 8th around 11 o'clock at night. And on April 10th, I can see that it was actually deleted. So let me dive into that specific log entry and take a look at what's going on here. I can see there is a lot of data. But very specifically, I can see somebody called the delete function on this, and I can see the principal email is mcos@google.com. Oh, that's me. Oh yeah, I actually accidentally deleted this person's VM, but we have a log entry of that, so we know exactly who took which entry. So that's all nice, but one of the common use cases we hear from our customers is they don't want to just be able to use it for diagnostics purposes, but they also want to be able to create proactive alerts on certain types of audit logs. So a common thing that we hear maybe is users who want to maybe create an alerting policy anytime a user is added to a new IAM role when they're outside of their organization. So it's kind of complicated, but that's okay, we can handle it. Let's start out with going to our IAM section here, and I'll open that in a new tab. And I'm going to, just to kind of test this out, add a new member, audit logs rock@gmail.com. Alrighty, and I'm going to select a role for this and grant them a role. So I'm going to go ahead and save, and I'm going to go back to my logs and take a look to see if I can see what happened there. So I know there's something to do with audit logs rock. Now when I search that, oh look, I'm searching through my GCE VM instances, which isn't actually where I want to be looking. So I'm going to convert to the advanced filter here. And I can see I have a more advanced query language that I can interact with. So rather than look for everything just on my GCE instances, I'm going to look for audit logs rock across everything. And here I can see that we recently added audit logs rock to a set IAM policy, and I can see kind of the details here. So I'm going to go ahead and click and show matching entries. I always want this just to be limited to my audit logs. So I'll add that into my filter. And then I might also want to say, I don't want to limit it just to audit logs rock, but let me find out exactly where that is. So I'm going to look into here and look at my service data, policy delta, my binding deltas, and I can see the member who was added here is auditlogsrock@gmail.com. So if I click show matching entries for just a moment, I can change this so that I exclude anything, so I'm adding my not here, that matches user colon, and then I'm going to say my organization is at google.com. Let me try making sure we still see the right audit log there. All right, good. So that's appropriate. From here, I can, in one step, just create a metric. So what this will do is, for any new log entries coming in, we will check what logs-based metrics we actually have, and if it matches any, we'll count that. So we'll basically be counting any incoming log entries that match this filter. So I'm going to name it logs from outside my org. And that's it. I'm going to go ahead and create the metric. There are some more advanced things you can do with logs-based metrics, but we'll save that for a different day. And you can see this is actually my second logs-based metric here. And now what I want to do is actually create an alerting policy from it. So what I just created was logs from outside my org. I'm going to go ahead and create an alert from this metric. So this is popping up the Stackdriver monitoring console. Remember we said there are two different tools within Stackdriver that we're going to be using. One is monitoring, the other is logging. Also, if you recall, we said logs-based metrics will only apply for data going forward. So we just created this logs-based metric. We won't see any data here. That's okay. But I want to say I want to be alerted anytime this happens. So if I see even one ever, I want to be alerted for that. and we'll say across any resource. I'm going to go ahead and save the alerting condition. So this is a Stackdriver monitoring alerting UI. The way it works is we're going to define these conditions. If those conditions are violated, then we'll automatically create an incident and send some notifications. So the next thing we need to do is choose what notifications we need to send here. So we have a number of different notification options, email, our Cloud Console mobile app, some other commonly used ones are webhooks, Slack, and PagerDuty. In this case, I'll leave it at email, and I will send it to auditlogsrock@gmail.com. I could add another notification if I wanted. I can add some documentation. Someone added a policy outside our org. Go talk to them. I could link to a playbook here as well. And then I can name the policy. So alert if users outside my org. I'll go ahead and save my policy. All right, so now let's go ahead and test it. I'm going to go back to our IAM page over here. And I'm going to go ahead and test this again by adding another member. So auditlogsrock@gmail.com. Alrighty, and I'll set a random other IAM role and save that. It should take us just a minute for that alerting policy to fire. So while we're doing that, let's go ahead and talk about another common use case that we hear from customers, which is great. It's fantastic that we can alert on our audit logs. But what I really want to also be able to do is to do some automation based on our audit logs. And so here's where the power of the Stackdriver logging platform is really powerful. So we're going to start out with what we're going to do is we're going to take those audit logs that are coming in. We're going to export the matching logs that we care about to a PubSub channel, and we'll use Cloud Functions to take action based on that. So again, the kind of flow is audit logs are automatically generated. That's fantastic. They'll come into Stackdriver logging. From there, they will go to this log sync that we need to create. And then from there, they'll go to PubSub. We'll use Cloud Functions to do whatever kind of crazy processing we dream up. So for this example, let's say every time we start up a new VM, we want to apply a label, or maybe check to see if that label exists, and if it doesn't, then automatically apply that label. For example, say that the environment is prod. So the first thing we need to go ahead and do is create an export. So you'll see over here, we started out in the logs viewer. We tested out logs metrics. That was how we created alerting policies. From there, we're going to do exports. I'm going to go over into our exports tab. I have a couple of exports already set up here. Similar to how logs-based metrics work, exports also work only kind of going forward for log entries. And so right before this, I did create the log sync just to make sure that everything works. So I'm going to go ahead and take a look at that log sync. And what I'm saying is I want anything, the colon here does a substring match, so anything where the log name matches my activity logs. And anything where the audit logging proto-payload.method name is insert. And that's the kind of keyword that you'll see in our docs is used when a new VM is created. And I also want to make sure that we actually have the type. This colon star means this field exists. So if I load, oops, I haven't created anything recently, but let me go ahead and load some older logs here and take a look. And we can see some examples of this as I've spun up in testing some different logs. So you can see I created my VM1, my VM2, my VM3. Each of these already happened back in time, but if I create the next one, my VM4, then it should automatically show up here on the sync. All right, so I have my sync working. From here, I'm actually going to go to Cloud Functions. Oops, there's one other thing I wanted to call out here for just a moment. The other important thing about this sync is where it actually goes. So if I edit this sync one last time, I had to specify the filter. I also had to specify the location. So I chose Cloud PubSub. My options were BigQuery, Cloud Storage, and PubSub. This custom destination will allow you to create and export to a different location. So like, for example, to a different project or even to a different org if you really wanted to and your permissions were set up correctly. BigQuery and PubSub happen in real time. Cloud storage is batched about once per hour, and so it takes a few hours for those logs to show up in that location. And we'll talk about why you might want to use these other export locations in a minute here, but we'll focus on Cloud PubSub for right now. And as soon as I chose Cloud PubSub, I had the option to either use an existing PubSub feed, Audit Log PubSub, or to create a new one. So I'm going to use the one I already have created here. So now I'm going to go over to my Cloud Functions. All right, in creating the Cloud function, took a little bit of thought, so I've done that ahead of time here. And you can see I've got this Cloud function called Process Audit Logs. I'm going to go ahead and click on it. I can see in the last hour, it hasn't had to process anything at all here. If I zoom out for a few days, we should probably see, yep, I processed a few things a couple of days ago and one not that long ago, just to make sure everything was still working. I can take a look at the trigger. So you can set Cloud Functions up to trigger on different things. In this case, we're triggering on the Audit Log PubSub topic that we had specified in our log sync. Now let's take a look at the source. All right, so what this Cloud function is going to do is act on a PubSub message. We know that the log entries are what will be coming in on that PubSub message. So we're going to parse that PubSub message, take a look at the log entry here. We have some auth stuff that I took from our handy examples in our documentation. And then we're going to check to make sure that this is actually a valid log entry for us. In this case, we only care about new VMs, so only things where it is actually a log entry and there is actually a request field. And the method name of that request field is compute.instances.insert. And then we'll actually pull the name of the VM out of there. And in order to add a label to that VM, we need to first get the labels that exist on that VM already, and then we can add new ones if needed. And so that's what we're doing here. We're doing a get on that new VM, logging things if we see an error. We have to pull out that fingerprint, and that's what we use to actually create the new label down here, where environment is prod. And then we'll say, yay, we set the labels, and exit out of here. So with that, let's go ahead and go back to our compute console. And I'm going to create a new instance. All right, and I'll call this my VM4. Go ahead and set it as a small one. And we'll go ahead and create it. So it'll take just a moment for that to spin up. And I should be able to see it in my audit logs. Let's hop over to the logs viewer here. And I'm going to go back to all my logs. And let me switch to the basic mode. All right, and so now again, I'm seeing all my logs from all of my VMs. Instead, I'm just going to take a look at my audit logs. Well, let's see, and indeed, I see that a new instance, my VM4, was inserted just a moment ago. So now I can go back to my Cloud function. And we'll take a look at the Cloud function and what it's processed. And you can see, oh yeah, it did see something just a moment ago. So oops, I should really have left the tab open, but that's all right. Go back to Compute Engine here. Take a look at my VM4. And you'll remember I didn't add any labels whenever I created this. So So if I want to make sure that this worked correctly, show info panel. And we can see it worked. We created a key with environment, and the value is prod. So you can use this for lots of different things. If a firewall instance or firewall rule is incorrectly configured, automatically remove that. Or again, if we think about the example we just did with our alerting, if someone adds a user who isn't part of the organization, maybe change the role that was just created. The kind of possibilities here are endless because we have so many different APIs that you can use. So speaking of the thing that we were alerting on, let's just hop over to the email for Audit Logs Rock, and we can see we should have received an email saying, hey, there was an issue, and indeed, I had created a previous alerting policy. So you see it represented a few times here, but I can drill into this, and it does let me know that the alerting policy was created, that the issue was detected here. Great. So moving along then, that was alerting and creating exports. I mentioned there are a few different types of exports. Another type of export that you might choose to use is BigQuery. And so I have, if I go to my exports, I can see a number of, I've created this thing for my BigQuery audit logs. And I could use BigQuery to actually explore the logs here as well. Let's see. And then the last thing that I want to show is, suppose I wanted to send all of my logs or all of my audit logs to GCS for compliance purposes. I could use a log sync for that as well. So same sort of process would hold here. I would choose which logs I want to export. And in this case here, I'll export all of my logs from all of my VMs, my GCE VMs. And I'll select a new storage location. I'll have to create a new one. All GCE logs. And I can then, there we go, go ahead and create this, and that way all my future logs will be put into that location. The thing that we hear from customers a lot, though, is, all right, that's cool, but I have an organization with thousands of projects. What if I need to, how do I make sure that I have log sync set up on all of them? And so we have a really cool tool called aggregated exports, which will allow you to manage that. So what aggregated exports will allow you to do, and you can do this via the API or via the G-Cloud command line interface, is I can create a log sync either at the folder or at the organization level. And if I say include children, then it will not only get the logs from all of the VMs that I have or all of the projects that I have today, but also from any new project that's spun up in the future. All right, and with that, let's move on to advanced use cases.
Cool. So Mary's looked at some of the ways that we can set up alerting and exports and storage. Let's look at some of the use cases that we might use those in. So the first one we have is insider risk audits. So we all have sensitive data in our businesses. We all want to make sure it's protected, but obviously we need people to actually go and use that data from time to time. So what if you want to put a little bit of an extra bit of security on top of that and audit some of those accesses that are particularly sensitive? So let's say that you receive in the security team a tip-off that one of your employees has been looking up customer data without a legitimate business purpose. You might have all of your storage systems inside GCP, you've configured data access audit logging, and it's piping it all into Stackdriver logging. As Mary showed you, you can set up exports, so you can export them into an external SIM tool if that's how you'd like to view your data. Or you can even export them into BigQuery if you prefer to use BigQuery. Once you've done that, you can search for an actor using the principal email field. You can audit all the resources that that person has accessed in the last 7 days or month, however long it is you're auditing their behavior. And then in some cases, you can even go ahead and audit the full request and response strings, which we have available in a lot of our audit logs. so you can get a true picture of exactly what people have been doing on your service. For compliance, we often have companies contacting us talking about how they need to retain audit logs to comply with whatever policy or regulation that they're subject to. For this, you might enable all the audit logs on all of your services, for example. That would go into Stackdriver logging, and then you would configure your export, this time into just a GCS bucket. And you might configure the IAM policy on that GCS bucket to be highly restricted, so only someone maybe in your legal team can access it. And then also you would enable data access audit logging on that bucket itself to make sure that you have an audit trail of who has been accessing the audit logs. From that, you can generate reports from your logs, turn them over to auditors, or retain them for a custom period. You can retain them for however long you want in your GCS bucket.
One other cool feature that we didn't talk about, but just kind of to call out here is we have a feature called logging exclusions. So if you want to store those logs in a GCS bucket, but you don't want to pay for those in Stackdriver logging, specifically for those data access logs, which can be really high volume, you can use your export along with a feature called exclusions and say, like, keep those logs out of Stackdriver logging. Because the export happens before the exclusion, those will still be exported, while you can choose not to pay for them in Stackdriver logging if you want those for compliance purposes, but don't need them for alerting or kind of other Stackdriver related functionality, searching, etc. Cool?
Great. Okay, so stay tuned for some live Q&A. We'll be back in less than a minute to answer your questions. Okay, and we're back. Thanks for asking all these amazing questions. We're going to go ahead and answer a few of them now. So the first one is, what if I want to delete my audit logs and not be charged for them?
Great question. We get this one a lot. So the answer is that audit logs are charged only based on, all logs are charged only based on ingestion. So you don't need to worry about managing the volume of data that is being stored. And I'll also remind folks that we only charge for the data access logs or the access transparency logs, not for the admin activity logs, which are available kind of free of charge as part of your use of the Google Cloud Platform.
One other thing I'd like to add there is just around deleting projects. So as you'd imagine, when you delete a project, it will delete the information around that project, and that will include the logs that are inside your project. So do make sure that you have the appropriate controls in place to prevent that from happening if that's something you'd like to avoid.
Great call.
So the next question is, can I write my own audit logs?
So we do support, via the logging API, writing all sorts of different logs. Audit logs are kind of a special type of log that we've defined, and we write to them on your behalf as part of Google Cloud Platform. So you can't write your own audit logs per se, but you can create your own logs that do anything else you want to capture there. And we support that via API. We also have a logging agent. You can send that through our client library. So there are lots of different ways to get your own logs into the Stackdriver logging platform.
Great. What actual information is contained inside the audit logs? Do you have the location of the accessor?
Can I take that one?
This is a really good question. So you can read about all the information that's contained inside the audit logs on our Google Cloud Platform audit logging documentation page. There's different types of information inside each of the 3 different types of logs. So in your admin access API logs, there's more information around people who've performed things like, as Mary was showing you before, creation and deletion of objects and so forth. In your data access logs, you're going to get more information about a resource that was read or written to. In the access transparency logs, you get similar information. However, you do get a slightly less information in that while in your admin activity and data access logs, you will get the principal email of the actor. In your access transparency logs, you won't get the principal email of the Google employee who performed the access, but you will get the location of where they accessed it from. Unfortunately, we don't have that information available yet inside our admin activity or data access logs. But if it's of interest to you, please feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. With respect to the access transparency logs as well, when we show you the location of the Googler, we also show you the desk location where that Googler is typically situated. So you'll be able to see that the Googler was in the US at the time, but their desk location is typically in Canada. That's something that we've heard from some customers as being helpful for compliance reasons, but your mileage may vary.
But if we have any customers who are concerned about capturing the location of the accessor for other logs, that generally isn't something we capture, right?
That's right, yes.
Great. And last question, are audit logs available for all our services?
Tough one. They're available for almost all of our services. We're hopefully going to be able to announce later this year that they are available for all of our services. Right now, you can head to our Google Cloud Platform documentation to see the full list of services that have logs available for them. And also, you can read what the state of those audit logging integrations are. So some cases, they may be in GA. For some other cases, we may be only producing them in beta. So you might not be able to rely on them as much as you can for a GA-style audit log. However, you can be fairly confident that for most services, by the end of this year, we should have audit logging coverage, at least for admin activity and data access audit logging. With respect to the the access transparency logs, those are only available for 6 services at the moment. They're available on Google Cloud Storage, Google App Engine, IAM, Key Management Service, Persistent Disk, and have I said them all? I think I have. The full list is available online. You can go and head to our Google Cloud Platform products page and read on the access transparency product page which services they're available for. We're constantly adding new services to our access transparency integrations. We have another 4 coming this quarter, and we're going to have a lot more added this year, so stay tuned if you're interested in that. You can definitely take a look at our website, and if you want, we can turn them on for you. One thing I will note that I don't think we've had a chance to say yet, though, with respect to the access transparency logs, is that you will need to have gold or platinum support enabled to turn those on. Once you have gold and platinum support enabled, you can turn access transparency logs on, and we'll collect and store those logs for you free of charge. But unfortunately, we don't yet offer this service to customers who don't have those support packages enabled.
Great, thanks.
Okay, I think that's all we have question-wise. As always, you know where to contact us. You can get more support from Google support. But otherwise, thanks so much for participating in this webinar. We hope you've had an amazing journey on this audit logging journey with us. Please tune in next Tuesday for the next episode of Cloud Live on Air. And thanks very much.
Bye.